Hi, this is Dan Lee, and I'm going to explain question 3 of Spring 2013's Exam 2. And that at this point, you should have a copy of the question in front of you, and if you don't, go to CSE2.lehigh.edu and find it under Exams. Now let's begin with the question. And for a quick introduction, I'm going to be talking about the topics covered in this question, common misconceptions new students might have when approaching the question, and further things that you could do to help prepare for future exams. Now, Exam 2 mainly focuses on the topics of loops and methods, and question 3 of Spring 2013 is designed to test the student's understanding of calling a method, parameter intakes, clear logic of loops, and the concept of when variables will return their values after passing through a method. Although the question was not extremely difficult, it did pose certain possible errors, and it is prone to tricky misunderstandings. For a beginner, one should watch out for a few things when approaching question 3. For first, always make sure to check what the method that are called on are returning as a type, and what type or types that particular method is accepting. This is an easy step, as the type in front of the method is actually in front of the method name, is actually what the method is returning, and the type inside the parameter is actually what the method is accepting. Easy to measure, but a lot of times is overlooked. The second aspect that is particularly tricky, and I won't lie, I had a mix up of it because the first time I did this problem, you have to watch out for the logical scoping of loops inside of the methods. It is important to understand or think of loops as almost like a counter, meaning that the loops won't generate any output if a command is not stated inside of a particular loop. You have to understand when a loop is actually generating output, or when it is used solely to determine how many times a particular action is ran. And we'll see this being demonstrated in part B of question 3 later. And to avoid these kind of mistakes, practice and try questions with nested loops, such as pyramid block questions, so that you can have full understanding of the logic behind the actions of loops and what they're actually doing. It is actually very helpful to take it slow at first and go through the loop one by one counter at once, to really dissect the loop and see how it is actually running. Aside from doing questions involving nested loops, you can actually practice questions with overloaded methods, as it will help you fully understand method calling and prepare for future exams. Although this particular question does not contain any method overloading, questions with method overloading actually really help students understand the parameter aspect of methods that is incredibly crucial to calling a method. Another aspect of methods that can be tricky is nested methods, or more specifically, calling a method inside another method call. So for example, question 3 of Exam 2 of Fall 2013 has a similar question, but unlike the question we're doing, question 3 in Fall 2012 has a method call inside of a method call. I would approach this question in much the same way I approach our question that we're about to do. However, the nested method call comes up, I will go through the inner method call first to determine what value the inner method actually returns. Then seeing if the value returned inside the inner method is the same type as the type accepted of the outer method call. And if it is, then I would use the return value from the inner method call as an accepted parameter value for the outer method call. And from that point on, you would solve a problem much like the same way that you would solve our problem, which I will later demonstrate again. It is with practice like these other more difficult questions that will give you a more fuller understanding to the concept discussed in the question. Now let's begin with question 3 of Spring 2013's Exam 2. Hi, this is Dan Lee again, and now we're actually doing the real tutorial of question 3. Now, at first we're going to do part A. Now keep in mind, question 3 asks you to write the output of the whatever is put here, and then write CE for compiler error, RE for runtime error, and if the output is an infinite loop, write infinite, so keep that in mind. So let's look at snippet A. Okay, so what I like to do is just look over the entire input first. So let's take a look. So public static int b, parameter int y plus equal 5 times 2 minus 1, return y. Okay, so that's the first method. Public static void a, parameter int x minus equal 2 times x, second method. Third method, public static void main, parameter string args, int foo equals 1, 4, int I equals 0, I is less than 3, I plus plus, system.out.println, input, and then it's connecting a string to a value. So right at this point right here, it calls on method B, which is here. Quick thing to keep in mind. So there are 3 methods. at first you should identify that the void main, this is the main method right here. So always begin by processing this method right here. Also, another thing is that in the entire input, there's not one point where method A is called. And also realize that method A is actually a void method, so it actually does not return anything. So for this particular question, this entire method is irrelevant, so just ignore this. Now going back to the main method again, you come through int foo equals 1, for, and then you have a for loop right here, for int I equals 0, I is less than 3, I plus plus, system.out.println, and then input, and then the value. So what this for loop is actually telling me is that this for loop is going to be ran 3 times. First time, the value of I is going to be 0. Second time is going to be 1. Third time is going to be 2. And when it tries to run the 4th time, the integer I is going to be 3. And then the condition in here is I is less than 3. So the for loop is going to realize that integer I is no longer less than 3. And at that point, it will terminate the loop. So for that reason, this loop is going to run 3 times, meaning that we will have 3 printed output lines. Now, let's actually get into the actual part of method calling. So, come through the for loop. At first, integer I equals 0, so I is still less than 3. And then it says inside the for loop, system.out.println input, which is a string, and then the value b of I. So this is actually calling a method b. And what it wants you to do is calls on method b with the parameter of I. So you're going to take the value of I and pass it through into method b. So in this first case, I is equal to 0, like what we said earlier. So it's going to return, it's going to take 0 and it's going to pass it through here. So in this particular method, the first time around, y is going to equal to 0. So going through this method now, 0 plus equals 5 times 2 minus 1. Now this is a simple order of operations, so keep in mind that these numbers never change. It's only going to simply be y. So just keep that for future preferences. So it's always going to be 5. So in this case, 0 plus equal 5 would tell me that it's going to add the value of 5 into the value of y and store that new value as the value of y. So in this case, it's going to be 0 plus 5 equals y. So with the new value of y being 5, I'm going to return 5 back into originally where it's actually called. So right here, b of I is going to equal 5 in the first time around. So you should write input colon 5. Second time around, it comes around to the end of the loop. It comes here again. Now second time around, it's going to be integer I equals 1. And it checks a condition. I is still less than 3. So take 1, pass it through here. 1 plus still 5. Remember that. 1 plus equal 5. So now y is going to be 1 plus equal 5. That means that 5 is going to be added to 1 and then stored into y. So it's going to return 6 now. It's back to here where it's originally called. Second line, keep in mind, this is the second line of output. Input colon 6. Now it's going to come to the end of the loop again. And it's going to come through here. Now the third time around, integer I equals 2. Checks the condition. It is still less than 3. So the for loop runs this right here. Calls on the method again. So now it's going to pass 2 through here. So 2 plus equal 5 is equal to 7. So y is now 7. Return 7 back to here. So input colon 7. That's what it's supposed to print out. So third line of output is going to be input colon 7. Now the loop runs to the end and it comes through the top again. Keep in mind that at this exact point after it finishes, the loop still does not know that it should terminate right now. So it runs to the top again. Now integer I equals 3. Now checks the condition. 3 is less than 3. Does not run. So the for loop knows that is not less than 3. So it terminates the for loop, and there we go. We have 3 lines of generated output. And this is what your generated output should look like. Input colon 5, input colon 6, and input colon 7. So that, my friends, are part A. Okay, now let's do snippet 2, or part B of question 3. This question is kind of similar to the first one. You can see 3 methods here. We have one void main, so we have one main method here, and then we have 2 other methods. However, unlike the first question, we can see that there is y method called and x method called, meaning that unlike the first one, all 3 methods will be used this time. It is also important to mention 2 of the common misconceptions that I mentioned earlier in my introduction video. So one of them being understanding the logic and the scoping of the loops. So as you can see here, inside this loop, it says for I equals 3, I is bigger than 0, I minus minus, y plus equals y val. So in here, there is no actual printed, there's no actual command that's going to print or generate an output. The code that generates output is actually outside of the loop, which is telling me that if everything goes smoothly with the compiling of the code, running of the code, and no infinite loops, that this code should only return or generate 1 line of output here. So if I do actually have an answer, there will only be 1 line of output here. So that's one thing to note. Second thing to note is that since val is inside of the for loop and it's being called, it's also being used as a parameter, the value of val is going to change. That when it's declared outside this for loop, it's not declared as a final int. It doesn't say final int val equals 3. It just says integer val equals 3, telling me that initially it's initiated as 3. However, because it's inside the for loop and there's an action that's going to change the value of val, the value of val is going to change. It's not going to stay 3. So, with that being said, let's run through the entire thing. It starts with public static void main, string args, the basics, integer I equals 1, value equals 3. And then it says for I equals 3. Now this is a part that may pose confusing to some people, but here's what you need to know. So outside the for loop, integer I is declared, and the value of I is originally set to 1. However, inside the for loop, it says I equals 3. So what this actually means is that the integer I is actually declared outside of the for loop, but the value of it doesn't matter because inside the for loop, I is initiated as 3. So it's declared outside, but the value of the value given inside the for loop is the one that we're actually going to use. So in this case, for I equals 3, I is bigger than 0, I minus minus. Nothing else going on, it's just one single loop. This tells me again that this for loop is going to run 3 times exactly. It's going to run the first time being 3, second time being 2, third time being 1, and when it tries to run the 4th time, it's going to realize that it fails to suffice the condition written here of I is bigger than 0 because the 4th time around I is going to equal 0. It's then going to terminate the loop. That means that the for loop is going to run 3 times. So that is telling me that the value of val is going to change 3 times, but again, keep in mind that we are only going to print out 1 line of output. So let's go through this. Integer I equals 3, I is bigger than 0, I minus minus. So in the beginning, I is equal to 3. Okay, val equals 3. Val is also declared outside as 3, but there's nothing else inside the for loop that gives another value to val. So val is going to stay 3. It's going to say 3 plus equal y of val, which is y of 3. So at this point, method y is called upon. So I'm going to pass the value of 3 into method y as integer k. So that's going to be int j equals x of k, which is going to be x of 3. So right here, again, we see another method being called inside of this method. So like we did earlier, it's going to be x of 3. So we're going to pass 3 into method x. And then so method x is going to have int k equals 3. So it's going to say int j equals k plus 2 or int j equals 3 plus 2. So that would set j equal to 5, and that's going to return j into originally where it's called. So it's going to be right here. So it's going to be int j equals 5, and it's going to return j or return 5 into originally where it's called again, which is right here. So let's see what it says again. Keep in mind that y val equals 5, and that val still equals 3 because val hasn't changed. It's only because it's after put through the method, it has changed to 5. So it's going to be y val equals 5, val is equal to 3, 3 plus equal to 5 equals 8, sets new value of val to 8. So keep in mind, you should write it down on a piece of paper, val is equal to 8. Also realize that nothing is printed out because system.out.println line is outside the for loop. So simply all we did the first time going through the loop is change the value of val from 3 to 8. Second time around, I equals 2 because I minus minus. Checks the condition. 2 is still bigger than 0. Okay, we're good. And going through, now val, keep in mind val is now 8. So val plus equal y val, which is y of 8. Same thing as before, the method of y is called on, so we pass 8 through into here, into method y as integer k. So int j equals x of k, or integer j equals x of 8. So we pass k again into method x as integer k again. So in this case, it's going to be integer j equals k plus 2. So integer j equals 8 plus 2. Now we're going to return j, which is 10, pretty simple math, back to where it was called, right here. So integer j equals 10. And it's going to return j to where this was called, boom, right here. So now this y val equals 10. Keep in mind, again, that val did not change, and it is still 8. It is simply y val that is 10. So 8 plus equal 10 equals 18. Stored in the new value of val. So val is now equal to 18. Now write that down again. Again, no output, just change in value of val. So now val is 18. Third time around. So coming through the loop again, I equals 1, checks condition, still fulfills it. Okay, where it go? And val plus equal y val. So now keep in mind val is 18, like you've written it down. Plus equal y of val, which is y of 18. Calls on method y again. Boom. Passes 18 through to here. So 18 is now in k. In j equals x of k, which is x of 18. Method x called. Boom. Pass 18 through here. So int k is here is 18. So int j equals k plus 2. Int j equals 18 plus 2. J is 20. Return 20 to where it was called. Int j equals 20. Return 20 to where it's called. Boom, back to here. So now y val equals 20. Like I said earlier, val did not change. Val is still 18 in this case. Y val is 20. 18 plus 20 stored in the new value of val, 38. So now value equals 38. Write that down. Now, come through again. Boom, boom, boom. Fourth time around, I equals 0. Checks condition. Wait, what happened? I is not bigger than 0 anymore. Therefore, for loop ends. So exits for loop. And then now we come to this line of code. This line of code asks us to print out val, which is a string attached to a value of val. And as we have written out earlier, val is equal to 38. So here we write val colon 38 because that's the final value of val that we came out with after exiting the for loop. So this is what your output should look like. val colon 38. After we go through this line of code, we end the entire input. And so the answer of part B is val colon 38. This is Stanley again, and thank you for watching my solution to problem 3 of exam 2, spring 2013. And I'm signing out, and this is CSE2. Thank you for watching.